Prince's music was like the soundtrack to your life. But there's no one for whom that's more true than Mayte Garcia. She was his wife, his muse, his best friend.
At 51, Mayte Garcia isn't just looking back. She's telling the truth. Once the young bride of Prince, she lived in a world of music, magic, and mystery. But behind the scenes was a love story that cracked under pressure. For years, fans only saw the perfect pictures, the performances, and the passion. What they didn't see was the heartbreak that pushed her to walk away from the man everyone else thought was untouchable. So why did Mayte finally divorce Prince? And what secrets has she been carrying all this time? Stay with us, because this is where the fairy tale unravels. Before the legend Prince's untold beginnings, Prince was never just born, he was unleashed. From the moment he hit a stage, it was clear this wasn't some ordinary kid from Minneapolis. He was destined to shake music to its core. With his high-heeled boots, ruffled suits, Prince didn't just perform, he electrified. But before the world saw the superstar, there was simply Prince Rogers Nelson, a boy growing up in Minneapolis, born on June 7, 1958. His father played piano, his mother was a jazz singer, and young Prince was determined to outplay them both. By the age of 7, he had already written his first song. Piano, guitar, drums. He taught himself everything, because music for him wasn't just a passion, it was survival. Behind the sparkle of his genius was a childhood filled with problems. His parents split when he was 10, and his mother quickly remarried. The relationship with his stepfather was rocky, and Prince spent years bouncing between homes, never really belonging anywhere. On top of that, he struggled with epileptic seizures as a child, something other kids cruelly teased him about. Later, he admitted that the only way to cover that pain was to make himself flashy and noisy. And oh, did he succeed. By the time he was 10, things at home had gotten so tense that he left his father's house and moved in with neighbors, the Andersons. There, he formed a brotherhood with their son, Andre, who would later become Andre Simone. The two of them started a band called Grand Central, playing local gigs and chasing dreams far bigger than Minneapolis could hold. Prince lived and breathed music. As a teenager, he buried himself in the basement studio of a local DJ, transcribing the lyrics of legends like James Brown and Aretha Franklin, studying every sound like scripture. And soon, he wasn't just copying, he was creating. By 16, he had left school and carved out his lane. The Minneapolis sound was born, funk, rock, soul, and synth colliding in a way the world had never heard. By 18, Prince was already a session guitarist. By 19, he had a Warner Records deal. His first album, For You, dropped in 1978. Critics weren't floored, but Prince was just warming up. A year later, he was on the road performing solo shows that were anything but ordinary. Erotic, theatrical, dangerous, he declared what pop was missing: risk. And risk was exactly what he embodied. Then came the 80s, the decade where Prince didn't just rise, he skyrocketed. 1999 turned him into an MTV darling, his image and sound searing into pop culture. And then came Purple Rain, the album, the movie, the phenomenon. For 24 weeks straight, Purple Rain owned the Billboard charts. 25 million copies sold worldwide. Overnight, Prince became more than a musician. He was an icon. But behind the scenes, Prince was running his world like an army general. The man was obsessive, private, and relentless. Those who worked with him described the grind as a tour of duty. His engineer, Susan Rogers, once admitted that life with Prince meant sleepless nights, endless calls, and zero negotiation. If Prince wanted you back in the studio, you were there. Carmen Electra, who briefly dated him, revealed that he barely slept. She would wake up to an empty bed, only to find him deep in his home studio, lost in the music. Journalist Alan Light remembered touring with him. 3-hour sound checks, 2-hour concerts, and then after-parties that lasted until dawn. The stamina was inhuman, but so was his output. Prince demanded perfection because he lived for freedom. The freedom to say what he wanted, play what he wanted, and never let the industry control him. He even fought Warner Brothers head-on, famously changing his name in 1993 to an unpronounceable symbol, forcing people to call him the artist formerly known as Prince. It wasn't just a stunt, it was rebellion, his way of saying, "You don't own me." Even as the spotlight shifted in later years, Prince never stopped. He recorded, he toured, and he played with the same intensity he had as a teenager scribbling James Brown lyrics in a basement. In 2010, he was named one of Time's 100 most influential people. Prince Rogers Nelson didn't just make music. He bent it, broke it, rebuilt it, and left it in a shape no one else could copy. And even in death in 2016, his shadow still looms large. The boy who once felt unwanted carved his own throne and made the world bow to his sound. Inside Prince's secretive love life, Prince wasn't just a musical genius. He was a man who lived surrounded by desire. Women were drawn to him, and he never made any attempt to hide his fondness for them. Over the years, his name became linked to some of the most famous women in Hollywood and beyond. Madonna, Sheila E. Carmen Electra, Kim Basinger. The list reads like a hall of fame of beauty and power. And while Prince only walked down the aisle twice, the romances in between were just as unforgettable. Passionate, messy, sometimes scandalous, but always unforgettable. Take Kim Basinger, for example. In the late 80s, she and Prince ignited one of his most notorious affairs. Their chemistry was so undeniable that it spilt straight into the studio. Word spread that Basinger's vocals on the were recorded, while the two were having music and intimacy fused into one provocative piece of art. The rumor alone set the world buzzing. But behind the scenes, her family was alarmed. They worried Prince's influence over her was too strong, so much so that they once staged a rescue mission to pull her from Paisley Park while he was away. At the time, Kim was on the verge of Hollywood superstardom with Batman, while Prince was dominating the soundtrack. Their lives collided at just the right moment. Years later, when asked about it, Kim looked back with nothing but fondness. She called it a special time, saying she never restricted herself. If the connection was there, she went for it. And with Prince, she absolutely did. But Kim wasn't the only one whose life Prince altered. In the early 90s, he discovered a young woman named Tara Lee Patrick. Prince didn't just date her, he reinvented her. He renamed her Carmen Electra, transformed her into a star, and pushed her into the limelight. Their romance was tangled with mentorship, passion, and performance. After his death, Carmen admitted she would always love him. He had given her more than a name. He had given her belief in herself, a gift she would never forget. Then came Apollonia, forever tied to Prince through Purple Rain. On screen, she was his love interest. Off screen, the sparks kept flying. She once described him as her greatest friend, confessing that their bond was both platonic and romantic all at once, something that blurred every line and left their connection impossible to define. Not every romance was long, but all of them left a mark. In the early 90s, Prince had a brief fling with Twin Peaks star Sherilyn Fenn. Years later, she admitted that he had inspired her, changed her life, and left her with memories she would never shake. Around the same time, whispers swirled that Prince wrote The Most Beautiful Girl in the World for actress Vanessa Marcille, who even appeared in the song's video. It was never confirmed, but fans have long believed she was the muse behind one of his most iconic ballads. And then there was Vanity. If any relationship mirrored Prince's fire, it was this one. Vanity-born Denise Matthews fronted the girl group Vanity 6, created by Prince himself. Together they were explosive. A pairing that radiated both passion and chaos. But their love story was also tragic. Vanity spiraled into drug addiction, and their romance eventually crumbled under the weight of her struggles. She later died in 2016 from renal failure, a loss that echoed Prince's own untimely death just months later. But through it all, one woman always stood out: Sheila E. The drummer who matched Prince's rhythm on stage also matched his energy off of it. Their romance was real, but their friendship was eternal. Even after the love affair ended, they remained collaborators, confidants, and true partners in music. When Prince passed, Sheila admitted that the word loss had taken on an entirely new meaning. Prince's love life was never ordinary. It was passion mixed with scandal, mentorship tangled with romance, and heartbreak alongside inspiration. For him, women weren't just lovers, they were muses. They were the flames that fed his fire and the mirrors that reflected his genius back at him. And just like his music, His romances were impossible to confine, wild, unpredictable, and unforgettable. The day Prince met Mayte, a love story begins. Before fame ever found her, Mayte Garcia was already writing her own destiny. At just 9 years old, she turned to her mother and boldly announced that one day she would marry either Luis Miguel or Prince. Her mother laughed, dismissing it as the kind of fantasy little girls dream up. But Mayte wasn't joking. She meant every word. She didn't end up with Luis Miguel. Instead, fate delivered her the other name on that list, Prince. The girl who once sat glued to the screen watching Purple Rain until she knew every scene by heart, grew up to become his pen pal, his muse, his collaborator, and eventually his wife. In 1996, she was 22, he was 37, and the fairy tale she had spoken into existence seemed complete. But this story didn't start at the altar. It began years earlier, with a mother's determination to make her daughter's dream come true. Mayte had been dancing since elementary school, ballet, belly dance, performing at banquets and community events. By 16, her mother decided it was time to take a leap. She packed a videotape of Mayte performing and made sure it landed in the right hands at a Prince concert. It sounded crazy, but somehow it worked. One of Prince's dancers took the tape backstage. Minutes later, he returned with a message that changed everything. "Prince would like to meet you. He saw your tape." When Mayte walked into the room, Prince looked at her and said he liked her performance. Then, almost suspicious, he asked if she was really 16. When she confirmed, he asked for her number. The whole exchange lasted less than a minute, but to Mayte, it felt timeless, like she'd been pulled out of her own life and into his. That night, Prince invited her to his hotel room, not for scandal, but to watch more of her tapes. He was 32, she was 16, and what unfolded wasn't a romance, but the beginning of something far more complicated. They started writing letters, spending hours on the phone. In her memoir, Mayte admitted there was no relationship at that time. Prince never denied he might have had an occasional thought, but he drew the line, refusing to take advantage of a teenage girl. Once Mayte graduated high school, the bond took on a new shape. Prince offered her a spot as one of his backup dancers and soon became her legal guardian. At 18, she moved into Paisley Park, living in the heart of his world. Even though Prince dated other women, it was Mayte who stayed in his room until dawn, just talking, laughing, and developing a closeness that blurred the lines between friendship and something more. By 19, the line disappeared completely. Prince looked at her and told her plainly, "I think it's time." He directed her to get birth control, and Mayte, thrilled, nervous, and ready, marked the moment in her journal. In bold letters, she wrote, Feb. 9, 1993, not a virgin. Next to it, she drew a winking smiley face, adding 3 simple words, patience pays off. That patience carried her all the way to February 14, 1996, Valentine's Day, the day she became Mrs. Prince. She was just 22, standing beside one of the most famous men in the world, and to everyone watching, it looked like a fairy tale carved in stone. But fairy tales rarely hold up in the real world. Behind the scenes, the cracks began to show. By 2000, the marriage had fallen apart, leaving Mayte to walk away from the man she had once called destiny. Prince moved on quickly, marrying charity worker Manuela Testolini in 2001. But history repeated itself. 5 years later, when that marriage ended too, what the world saw as love stories in reality were tales of passion, loss, and endings that came too soon. And for Mayte, the girl who once declared she would marry Prince, the dream that came true also became the heartbreak that would define her story forever. The scandals that haunted Prince. Prince didn't just make music, he made headlines. For all his genius on stage, behind the scenes he was no stranger to controversy, and sometimes the drama around him was almost as loud as his music. Take the record label War that rewrote music history. In the early 90s, Prince wanted ownership of his master recordings, but Warner Brothers refused. His response? Pure rebellion. In 1993, he changed his name to an unpronounceable symbol. The world would come to know him as the artist formerly known as Prince. He even stepped on stage with the word slave scrawled across his face. To fans, it looked shocking. To critics, it seemed bizarre. But decades later, it's remembered as a bold fight for artists' rights, long before the industry caught up. Of course, this wasn't the first time Prince had stirred the pot. Back in 1981, he titled his fourth album Controversy, complete with tracks like Sexuality, Do Me Baby, and Jack You Off. The message was clear. Prince didn't just embrace scandal, he invited it. By 1986, he proved he wasn't afraid to cut ties either. Prince disbanded the Revolution, firing key members Wendy and Lisa after they complained about not getting the credit they deserved. Fans were stunned, but for Prince, control was everything. Even his songs caused firestorms. His track Darling Nikki from Purple Rain scandalized Washington after Tipper Gore overheard her daughter listening to it. The outrage birthed the Parents Music Resource Center and led to those infamous parental advisory stickers on albums. Instead of backing down, Prince leaned in harder, doubling down on his provocative style with tracks like Cream and Get Off, daring anyone to silence him. But his battles weren't just with politicians or labels. In 1990, when Sinead O'Connor recorded her now iconic version of Nothing Compares to You, Prince wasn't happy. Reports claimed he confronted her about her language, and Sinead's reply was sharp as a blade, "Go fuss yourself." It was classic Prince, never letting anyone, not even another star, take his work without his say. Fast forward to 2001, and Prince shocked fans again by announcing he was a Jehovah's Witness. His music shifted, with albums like The Rainbow Children reflecting his new faith. Some fans embraced the change, but others were caught off guard when he swapped out raunchy lyrics for biblical ones on stage. Prince, as always, played by his own rules. And when the internet era arrived, those rules got even stricter. In 2007, fans revolted after he cracked down on unauthorized use of his music and images, forming a group called Prince Fans United. The next year, he picked fights with YouTube, eBay, and Pirate Bay for copyright violations, even removing his own creep cover from Coachella, until Radiohead reminded him it was actually their song. Then came 2010, when Prince declared the internet completely over and yanked his music from streaming platforms. Fans hated it, but Prince wouldn't budge. Even on stage, controversy followed him. His 2007 Super Bowl halftime show had critics clutching their pearls after he performed behind a sheet with his guitar positioned in a way that many thought looked sexually suggestive. And when he opened the 2004 Grammys alongside Beyoncé, some accused him of trying to steal the spotlight, though others argued it was just Prince being Prince, commanding the stage as only he could. Then there were the personal controversies. Prince was famous for mentoring women like Vanity, Apollonia, Sheila E., and Mayte Garcia, but critics later accused him of being controlling, shaping not only their music but also their image, their style, and even their careers after him. Mayte herself, in her memoir, described their love as passionate yet painfully complicated, especially after the devastating loss of their child. From record label wars to family tragedies, from shocking performances to internet battles, Prince lived at the edge of scandal. And maybe that's the real story. He wasn't just willing to break the rules, he made his legacy out of shattering them. But scandals weren't the only shadow following him. Prince's problem with drugs. Behind the purple lights and the sold-out tours, Prince's body was breaking down. What started as a stage accident would spiral into a secret battle that ended in the most ordinary yet heartbreaking way: a fight with painkillers. It began during the Purple Rain tour. Always determined to push the limits, Prince planned to sing from a bathtub suspended 10 feet in the air. It was dramatic and daring, exactly the kind of spectacle his fans expected. But during rehearsal, the bathtub snapped. In an instant, he plummeted to the ground. The fall left him in agony. Soon after, he slipped again on stage and injured his knee. He powered through, finishing the tour with determination, but something changed. His hip, his leg, his back, none of it ever truly healed. Prince had always been proud of his discipline. For years, he stayed away from drugs, calling them a weakness that dulled creativity. In his early days, he was the odd one out, the musician who preferred dessert over cocaine, who scolded his friends for showing up high. While the industry was drowning in excess, he was the straight-edge genius, locked in marathon studio sessions fueled by nothing stronger than a slice of vanilla cake with chocolate frosting. But constant pain has a way of breaking even the strongest rules. By the late 1980s, cracks began to show. Prince, once the man who wouldn't even tolerate drugs around him, began experimenting. Ecstasy and hallucinogens crept into his world, soft at first but enough to raise red flags. It even seeped into his music. He recorded the Black Album, a dark, aggressive record that critics now consider one of his rawest works. But at the last minute, he pulled it. Rumors swirled that a bad trip convinced him the album carried a dangerous energy. Instead, he rushed out Lovesexy, a brighter, more spiritual record, but the switch cost him. The rollout flopped and his career took a hit. The physical pain never let up, and Prince's aversion to doctors made things worse. He avoided hospitals and surgery, terrified of losing control or canceling shows. Instead, he started reaching for pills. At first, it was just to keep moving, to get through another tour, another rehearsal, another night in the studio. But over time, the pills became more than relief. They became a lifeline. By the early 90s, rumors of rehab surfaced. Prince had stretches where he vanished from his band, where he stopped writing, stopped playing, and stopped being the machine that everyone thought he was. For a man who once lived and breathed music 24/7, even a week away from his guitar felt like a silent confession. Something deeper was going on. Still, he kept it hidden. Prince built his entire persona on control. He was the artist who dictated every note, every outfit, and every camera angle. To admit weakness, that wasn't an option, so he buried it. He worked, he performed, and he released albums. And when the pain got worse, he simply doubled down on the pills. By the 2000s, his body was giving out. Years of injuries had caught up to him, and the addiction that began as a way to manage pain was tightening its grip. He was smaller now, frailer, but he refused to let the world see it. On stage, he was still the master, dancing, playing, giving everything. Off stage, he was deteriorating in silence. In 2016, the secret could no longer hold. Prince died at just 57 years old from an accidental fentanyl overdose. The news shocked the world, not only because of the loss, but because it seemed so unlike him. This was the man who once ridiculed others for getting high, who threw people out of his circle for touching drugs, who prided himself on being square in a world of rock and roll chaos. And yet, his final battle was the very thing he had resisted his entire life. The irony was cruel. Prince wasn't using drugs to chase a high or to live out the cliches of fame. He was using them the way countless ordinary people do, to quiet the relentless ache of a body that could no longer keep up with the demands of a brutal schedule. His addiction wasn't wild. It was quiet, hidden, and tragically human. By the time he passed, he weighed just over 100 pounds. Pills were scattered throughout his home. The man who built a universe of sound, who demanded perfection from himself and everyone around him, was undone by the simplest, most devastating reality: pain and the desperate need to escape it. The world only saw the performer, the genius, the icon. What we didn't see was the man quietly fighting a war with his own body. But Prince's battles weren't just with himself. Behind the closed doors of his private life, another story was unfolding, one of love, loss, and heartbreak. Mayte Garcia exposes the real reason she divorced Prince. When Prince and Mayte Garcia married on Valentine's Day in 1996, it looked like the beginning of a modern fairy tale. He was the untouchable genius of music. She was the young dancer who had gone from fan to muse to wife. To seal the occasion, Prince handed her the keys to a 7,500-square-foot mansion in Spain, complete with its own music studio and even a professional hair salon. On the outside, it seemed like a dream too perfect to be real. But behind the luxury and the magic, problems were already forming. Problems that would soon split their love wide open. Mayte remembered those early days as intoxicating. They lived fast, shopped fast, and loved fast. Together, they'd storm Melrose in a limo, grabbing clothes off racks without even glancing at price tags. He called it shopping guerrilla style, and to her it felt like living in a movie. He was Prince. He didn't have to check a tag. The world bent to his presence, and she was swept along for the ride. But Prince wasn't just about the material thrills. He believed he and Mayte had known each other before, in another life. He told Oprah in 1996 that their bond felt ancient, like she was his sister, or even part of him in another existence. He spoke with certainty, insisting their connection was written in the stars, their souls meeting in Egypt, their destiny sealed by fate. To outsiders, it sounded strange, even kind of weird, as Oprah called it. To Prince, it was undeniable truth. He wasn't just in love. He was convinced their story had been thousands of years in the making. He poured this passion into music. The Most Beautiful Girl in the World wasn't just a song, it was a love letter, his way of immortalizing Mayte in melody. The world listened, and for a moment it felt like everything was perfect. But real life doesn't play out like a love song. Just 2 months into their marriage, Mayte discovered she was pregnant. What should have been the happiest news carried an edge of fear. Doctors warned of complications, urging them to take medical precautions. But Prince, ever resistant to interference, refused. He believed faith was enough. In October 1996, their son Amir was born. But joy quickly turned to heartbreak. The baby suffered from Pfeiffer syndrome type 2, a rare genetic condition. After 6 short days and multiple attempts to save him, Amir died. The loss was unspeakable. Mayte admitted she never got over it, and she believed Prince never did either. The man who had spent his life making the world dance and smile was suddenly hollowed out by grief. Still, he tried to hide it. Just weeks later, he and Mayte sat down with Oprah, putting on brave faces. Prince dodged questions about their baby, insisting their family existed and that they'd have more children in the future. But behind that public mask, the couple was unraveling. When Mayte became pregnant again, hope flickered, only to be crushed by a miscarriage. The back-to-back losses left scars that no mansion, no music, no past life story could heal. Mayte later admitted she believed the tragedies drove them apart. Prince seemed to carry the pain like a silent judgment, as if their inability to have children together meant their connection wasn't meant to last after all. It was a cruel twist for a man who once claimed his soul had loved her for thousands of years. Then came another divide. Prince's religious transformation. He became a devout Jehovah's Witness, and while Mayte tried to be supportive, she couldn't walk that path with him. She saw his devotion as part of his search for answers after losing their child, a way of clinging to something bigger than himself. But instead of bringing them closer, it only pulled them further apart. By 1998, the inevitable had happened. Prince stunned Mayte and the world by announcing at a press conference that he planned to annul their marriage. She was blindsided, devastated. She had believed in the bond he'd spoken about so passionately, the kind of love that spanned lifetimes. Instead, she was left behind, with nothing but memories and songs that the world still sings, but that cut her deeper than anyone could imagine. Life after Prince wasn't easy. Mayte found it nearly impossible to date musicians again. How do you move on when your ex-husband is Prince, when he's written some of the most beautiful love songs of all time about you? She admitted that no one else could measure up. Every poem, every melody from another man felt hollow compared to what she'd already lived. Still, she tried to move forward. She was briefly engaged to Tommy Lee, but nothing ever quite filled the void. And then in 2016, news broke that shattered her all over again. Prince was gone. At just 57, he died of an accidental fentanyl overdose. A man who had once sworn off drugs but had been consumed by pain and secrecy. For Mayte, the loss was unbearable. She had already buried their child. Now she was burying the man who had been her everything. She told the world she loved him then, loved him now, and would love him eternally. In her mind, he was finally reunited with their son. The love story of Prince and Mayte wasn't the fairy tale fans thought it was. It was passion and heartbreak, music and silence, past lives and devastating loss. For a moment, they seemed destined, bound by something bigger than themselves. But in the end, even love written in the stars can collapse under the weight of tragedy. And when it did, the world saw just how human even the most untouchable icon could be. Which of Prince's songs is your favorite? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.